There are now 17 states in this country where the coronavirus is spreading uncontrollably, and the president dons a mask for the first time. Also, some tragic news for a famous family in Hollywood that is sadly no stranger to tragedy. Here's what you need to know. Good Monday morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for July, what is today? 13th. I am Carlo Versano, and I'm doing it solo today. Jill is off for having a nice little long weekend, a deserved one, so it is just me. So we'll get you guys caught up on what happened over the weekend. I hope everybody had a good weekend. I know I did, although I got my first big sunburn of the year, which was only a matter of time. If you're fair-skinned like me, I'm sure that you appreciate the pain. But anyway, let's get to the news. Disney World in Orlando reopened to the public over the weekend, just as its home state of Florida recorded 15,000 new coronavirus cases in a single day. That is smashing the daily record reported by any state since this whole pandemic began. Over in Texas, the governor there warning that the, quote, worst is yet to come in that state. And at the same time, there's some new reporting this morning that the White House is now trying to discredit Dr. Fauci. The White House sending reporters a list of things that the country's top infectious disease expert was wrong about in the early days of the virus's spread. So let me just be clear about that once again. The White House is sending out what is essentially Oppo research on its own top infectious disease expert while the country is in the sort of throes of this pandemic. It is certainly true that Dr. Fauci did get some things wrong, and his messaging was not good in the beginning. The entire, none of the messaging was good, as we've said on this podcast, at least until this thing really got out of control. And there will come a time when we look back on it and say that, Dr. Fauci coming out in January saying it's nothing to worry about, coming out in February saying, you don't need to wear a mask, even in March saying that, those will be major mistakes. But the idea that, we're going to try and silence or sideline expert voices right now when I think we need them more than anything is really just bananas. And hopefully something Dr. Fauci is able to come out, and I don't even know what to expect actually, other than I hope that he keeps his job, because regardless of his mistakes, I think that he is trying to do the right thing. He's made no more mistakes than any of the politicians have made, and I think trying to sort of axe him, throw him under the bus for the White House to save face would be extraordinary, and let's hope that doesn't happen. As for Florida, I mean, the Disney World thing, I cannot imagine watching what's happening in Florida right now and thinking, this is the time to gather up the family, put them in the car, and bring them down to Disney World. It's mind-boggling, really. And honestly, shame on Disney for reopening Disney World right now. I understand that this is a company that has this very diversified business model, but it is diversified in such a way that every aspect of that business has just been absolutely decimated by the last few months, whether it's, movie theaters, theme parks, cruise ships. So they have a real problem, and I'm sure that there are some stockholders that want them to reopen, and I'm sure there's even some Disney employees that are happy to be getting paid again. But I think opening a theme park in a state in which this thing is just out of control, this will be taught in business schools, as I have said before, as sort of a case study in when corporations do the wrong thing. And the message it sends alone, I think, is just extremely it's really incomprehensible. However, let's a little bit of a positive note. Get this: in New York City, 4 months to the day since the first COVID death was recorded here, the city reported no coronavirus-related deaths on July 11th. So that is just incredible. And again, we've talked about it before, Jill and I know a lot of people have emailed in, but it is really a tale of two countries when you look at the map. Just in terms of this little sliver of, the tri-state, not even just the Northeast, but the tri-state area compared to the rest of the country is it's phenomenal. And if there's any sort of silver lining here, I think it's that the rest of the people in Texas and Arizona and Florida and California and some of these states that are really seeing out of control spread. If you talk to somebody in New York who's in New York City for the last 4 months, you know, the, they'll tell you that the universal mask wearing has made a difference. The social distancing has made a difference. The fact that people aren't spending a lot of time indoors with strangers. And I fear that, or I guess the good news would be that, as some of these states really go through hell right now, on the other side of it, I'm hoping that they will come to the realization that we in New York came to back in, March and April. So let's hope on that. The president, meanwhile, I mentioned this earlier, he wore a mask for the first time in public over the weekend when he took a tour of Walter Reed Medical Center in Maryland. So this is sadly a story that requires mentioning, given that we're 4 months into this thing and this is the first time that we've seen the president in a mask in public. So it's a good thing. I'm glad he did it. We should all be glad he did it. I feel a little bit like, Jill probably feels when her daughter makes a poo-poo in the potty and she has to, say, hey, you did it. Congratulations. You did good. But we do need to be encouraging this behavior. This could, seeing President Trump in a mask in public could get more people to realize that that's what they need to be doing. So more power to him. Let's hope we see more of it. And congratulations, Mr. President, for wearing a mask. Some other Trump news that we do have to mention. President Trump commuted the 40-month prison sentence of his longtime friend and associate Roger Stone. This happened late on Friday night, sort of a Friday night news dump that enraged Democrats, of course. Even some Republicans, actually. Mitt Romney came out pretty sort of guns blazing, talking about how this was just textbook corruption, clear abuse of power, and cronyism, which it pretty much is. But, Stone had been found guilty of 7 felonies related to the Russia investigation, including witness tampering, lying to the FBI, a bunch of those kind of like process crimes. And he had long resisted had long resisted pressure from prosecutors to flip on Trump, and now he is being rewarded for that. If Jill were here, she would probably make the point that this is the kind of thing that doesn't actually matter to any voters, won't sway any voters one way or another, and she's probably right about that. That's almost certainly true. But I would probably say to her in response, is that the bar now? Is it just is everything just in terms of whether or not it peels off, Trump's base or gets people back into his column? And I don't think that's necessarily a good place to be politically for the country. I'm not even really sure what the president gains politically from this, but I'm not really steeped in the sort of Fox News cinematic universe where I think Roger Stone is actually somewhat of a character and a hero to that matter, to that point. So if that is the case, which I suspect it might be, then I suppose this sort of goes with what we've been saying, in that President Trump is now focused entirely on motivating his base to come out. And commuting Roger Stone's sentence would go a long way to that. I'm not really sure if that's true or not, but it's certainly a theory. The president also knows that, the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, are completely incapable of really doing anything. They already impeached him. I highly doubt they would do it again, even though this could, you could argue this is an impeachable offense. So all that will happen is, a bunch of Democrats will make a fuss on Twitter and on cable news for a couple of days, and this will recede, as these things always seem to do. And again, because the Democrats are not very good at creating sort of a cohesive narrative around all of these sort of like drips and drabs of things that the president has done that in another administration would be considered sort of, incomprehensible, none of it really sticks to him. And in the meantime, he gets to reward a friend of his who didn't dime him out when he almost certainly could have. So maybe that's all it is. Moving on, it was another violent summer weekend across this country. 2 police officers in the city of McAllen, Texas, were ambushed and killed when they responded to a domestic disturbance there. A really sad story out of Texas. These two cops, 2 young guys, they were just knocking on a door. The suspect came out and shot them point blank. They didn't even really have a chance pants. In New York City, there were 15 shootings over a 15-hour period this weekend. That's more in one day than the same week last year. In addition to calls for reform, police departments, whether it's the NYPD or your little local town police department, they're all facing the specter of budget cuts due to the just plummeting state and local tax revenues and from the pandemic, right? So, putting aside even the Black Lives Matter protests and the calls to defund the police, police departments are already in trouble just in terms of these budget cuts that we're really gonna see the effects of in the next several months. But some statistics here: Milwaukee murders are up 37% this year. They're going to break their record of 167 back in 1991. Which actually included the Jeffrey Dahmer murders, if you can believe that. Chicago's on pace for its deadliest year since 1996. New York and LA are up 23% and 11% respectively in terms of murders. So there is no question that this is this is a trend that's happening. It's not good. People who are saying that this is a direct result of these calls to defund the police, they're being disingenuous. I'm pretty sure there's not a single police department in the country that has already had its budget cut. Right. I mean, it is happening. There's plans to do it. There's been votes to do it in several places. But it's not like the police have been taken off the street just in the last few weeks, at least not to my knowledge. So this is one of those things where there's just a lot of contributing factors at play, right? There's no single thing, I don't think, that you can attribute to this. It's a lot of things, and it's definitely something that we have to watch, and because we don't want to go back to the bad old days of the 80s and 90s in big urban centers, right? So switching gears, the deadline to file your 2019 tax returns is this Wednesday, for real this time. Remember, they had put it off from April to July when the pandemic was really catching on back in the spring, but Treasury Department says this is it. There's no more blanket extensions, though you can still request a personal extension if you e-file before Wednesday. You could get that extension easily if you just ask for it until October 15th. But if you are expecting a refund and you haven't done your taxes yet, you got to be patient. The IRS is warning people that it's facing a huge backlog, partly because of reduced staffing during coronavirus, but also because of all the extra work. Remember, this is the same department that had to send out millions of those stimulus checks over the last few months. So if you are expecting a refund, be patient. It's probably not going to be coming for a bit, at least from the federal government. Some news on the media beat today. ESPN has suspended its star NBA reporter, I always get this guy's name wrong, but Adrian Wojnarowski. He's better known as Woj. That's probably how you know him. Just on Twitter, he's an incredible reporter. He basically breaks almost all the news on the NBA beat. So anyway, Woj wrote a curse word, I guess he said F you in an email to Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley. Hawley he had sent out a press release in which he was the senator that is complaining about the NBA's social justice messaging, their plan to allow players to put these Black Lives Matter messages on their jerseys. Excuse me. So Woj was replying to that press release in which he wrote the profanity, and then the senator tweeted out his response. That apparently is what got ESPN to suspend him, although it's unclear for how long. Also, NBA players, including LeBron James, have been spending the weekend tweeting out of the bubble, "Free Woj," in response to his suspension. And that's not the only media story I want to just make a note of. If you haven't seen it, CNN did a very tremendous piece of reporting over the weekend. It was about the head writer of Tucker Carlson's popular Fox News program. This guy, his name is Blake Neff, and apparently he had been a prolific poster of really disgusting, extremely racist and bigoted, misogynistic remarks on one of these far-right online forums. It wasn't 4chan, but it was another one of these kind of dark hole of the internet places. He was posting under a pseudonym, But I guess that I don't know how CNN found it, but they put the pieces together that this was actually this guy who has this really influential job as Tucker Carlson's chief writer. So Blake Neff, immediately resigned as this piece came out. And Fox News actually put out a strong statement condemning him, which is notable only because they tend to not do that. Even when their people get in hot water for various things, they're usually pretty, they usually go to bat, or at least put out sort of like an anodyne, he has resigned, and we wish him luck in his endeavors. But they came down hard on this in this statement. I think because they see how serious this is. It's important to remember the lead writer on a news show. Having been somebody who's done that job, they're the person who writes what the anchor says, right? So when you see an anchor like Tucker Carlson speaking to the camera, he is reading what was written, or at least the first draft of what was written by somebody like this guy, Blake Neff. So if you're talking about a person like Tucker Carlson who has an extremely influential platform, this guy helped craft that platform, and he was clearly a racist. So that's an important story to keep note of. Also, switching gears again, some very sad news that I mentioned earlier in Hollywood this morning. Kelly Preston, the actress and wife of John Travolta, has died of breast cancer. She was 57 years old. Travolta announced on Instagram a few hours ago that Preston had passed away Sunday after a 2-year battle with the disease that she had kept private. She is survived by Travolta, her husband, and their 2 kids, Ella, who is 20, and 9-year-old Ben. And if you'll remember, back in 2009, their other son, Jet, died at the age of 16 from a seizure, what was a really just tragic story back then. So, just very sad news for that family. And finally, before we go, another thing I wanted to mention today, Sports Illustrated making history. The Brazilian model Valentina Sampaio, and I hope I got her name right there, she will become the first trans model to be featured in the iconic Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition when it hits newsstands later this month. It's actually not the first time that Sampaio is making history. She was the first transgender model to appear on the cover of Vogue back in 2017, and she was the first trans model to walk the runway for Victoria's Secret just last year. So some major strides being made in the sort of fashion, I guess you would call Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue fashion. I don't know. Anyway, mazel to her. Groundbreaking stuff. So we're happy for her. And that's what you need to know for Monday, July 13th. Jill will be back tomorrow. She will save me from having to do this solo, but hopefully we got through it, and I hope you guys have a great Monday.